Aarons Mele is the author of The Anxious Achiever, winner of the 2023 Media Award for Mental Health America. The book is described as a guide to managing the anxiety that comes with succeeding and leading. Morra spreads the word about controlling anxiety through her popular podcasts, TED Talks, LinkedIn, and through her talks like this one this evening. We're delighted to have you here, Morra, because you could be home with your 2 boys and Josephine, her 8-year-old who joins us here as a guest of honor tonight. So welcome so much to having you. According to your book, Morra, hundreds of millions of people have anxiety. From all walks of life, anxiety is the world's most common mental health ailment. Great leaders, historical figures like Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, John Lewis shared anxiety. Why is it so common? Societal pressures, technology, polarization, all of the above. What's going on?
I will take it. It's so great to be here. Thank you to my wonderful friend Lori. I was just saying that I am so inspired by everything you do here. I want to create a Lexington Women's Forum. Because this is amazing. So anxiety. Anxiety is actually a natural and very essential emotion that we all feel, right? We need anxiety, right? We were saying you're a performer. If you never felt anxious before you got on stage, you wouldn't have that magic spark,
Right, that energy
that connects with the audience, right? So anxiety exists for very, very good reasons. It kept us alive for millennia because it's a threat response, and it provides us motivational energy. And so actually, neuroscience is sort of shifting its opinion on anxiety. And there's books out and scholarship, anxiety is a very misunderstood emotion, and we need it, and it can actually be good. However, it's on a spectrum, right? And so at the bottom of the spectrum is clinical anxiety, when anxiety is in disorder territory. And I myself have had clinical anxiety since I was 19 years old. I also have depression and I have bipolar II disorder, so I have a diagnosed mental illness. And anxiety at the bottom end of that spectrum is the world's most common mental illness, right? And it kind of makes sense because if you think about it, whether it's chemical, nature, nurture, it is very easy for our brains to work over time and be exacerbated and triggered by all that we go through as being human, and especially this week, it's hard not to wake up and think, what is this world? And in the middle, which is really what the book is about and what I work with leaders about, is the sense of sort of chronic anxiety that I think a lot of us feel right now. It's weighing heavily on our shoulders. It's the sense that things are not going to be okay. And how this gets complicated is that a lot of us live with this anxiety, and it actually keeps us pushing forward. This is the anxious achiever, which I'm sure a lot of you in the room might identify with, or certainly as achievers. And a lot of us achievers use our anxiety. It becomes a habit. It's like our oxygen. And we push because we want to, but also because if we don't push, we feel like things aren't going to be okay, or we're not going to be okay, or we won't be liked, or we will be shamed, or people will judge us. And so in the book, I talk about anxiety. It's a very double-edged sword. It's complex, but it's also necessary.
So let's do a little, take a temperature in the room. Raise your hands. How many of you feel you have anxiety part of the time, most of the time? Like, right? Yeah.
You're in good company.
Yeah. It is so common. And yet, there is a shame that comes with it. So talk a little bit about that double-edged sword. You talk about being both a blessing and a curse, and how you channel that into a strength.
It's a blessing, a curse, and sometimes it's just a pain, we have so much shame around mental health. And, you know, my specialty is working with leaders in work. And, you know, we have really old models of what leaders, again, you and I have had many conversations about this. We have old models of what leaders look like. I was raised that a leader was the white guy standing in front of the room. And he didn't tremble. He always knew the answers. He was alone, forging forward. And even though, thank goodness, that's changing, that's really hard to die.
Yeah.
And that person is weak. And we believe that any hint of vulnerability, anxiety, mental illness is weak. It's a long-held stigma. But what I talk about in the book, and when you mention Churchill and Lincoln especially, you know, Lincoln now would be diagnosed as a clinical depressive. Lincoln had profound mental illness that he channeled and was extremely open about. Everybody who worked with him knew and supported him. And so these stigmas are also kind of new, and they can be broken through, and that's a lot of what I work with leaders to try to help talk about.
And yet, when you, Morra has one of LinkedIn's most popular podcasts about anxiety. When you are seeking CEOs or thought leaders from whatever world you're seeking on anxiety, you have trouble getting them to talk publicly. Talk about it.
I mean, you're a journalist, right? Getting someone to go on the record can be hard. I think it all comes down to the sense of shame and stigma. You know, I've had PR people for leaders at publicly traded companies say, you can't talk about this. What if this, you know, the stock price could dip, right? This stuff is very serious. I was just on stage with a big CEO who was going to talk about it and then decided that he couldn't. And so, and I'm not going to lie, like it is risky to come to your boss these days and say, I have an anxiety disorder. This is what I need to be careful about. And yet, that might be essential for your own well-being and mental health. And when you're a leader, anxiety comes with the job, and sometimes that anxiety is very intense. Yeah.
So let's bring that down to a more granular level. Not the CEO, but your friend, your new boyfriend, your new mother-in-law. How do you reveal that you're you have anxiety, this is an issue that you have to deal with, or don't you?
Well, if you're like me, your mother-in-law makes you anxious. No, actually, my mother-in-law follows me on Instagram. It's really nice. I mean, I think it's really human. You know, we connect on such human levels. We connect through story. We connect through vulnerability and seeing each other. And so I think that the question is really, how does my anxiety affect how I show up? You know, I did an interview with a Google executive. Big VP at Google ran their IT operation, right? Huge job. And he had fear of flying. His anxiety showed up as fear of flying. For 4 years, he could not get on an airplane. And he said, I would plan meetings that I didn't go to.
Where?
And
Is he the founder of Zoom by any chance?
Yes.
Oh my God!
But he did push forward a video conference.
Right.
That was the necessity.
Self-defense.
That was the mother of his invention. And I think that's such a great story because, you know, the truth is that what we manage when we deal with it can make us more creative, it can make us stronger, and it can make us empathetic, you know? And so how do you know that you being open about, I'm really anxious today, I'm not sleeping well, this war has gotten me really sad, doesn't open up a window for someone else to connect.
So amidst this crowd, there are many of them with new partners, new friends. How do you bring this issue of anxiety to the forefront in a new relationship? Or do you? Do you kind of hide in the bathroom, which is my next question.
I mean, I think it's your choice. You know, a lot of questions that I get from people we live in a culture that is very TED Talkified. And I think that many people, even in the workplace, feel like they need to disclose and want to tell their story. But that's a personal choice, And I think that if you feel like you disclosing will make the understanding in your relationship stronger, then I think do it. I will say though that Josephine's father, your dear friend, Nico, he has said that there's a third person in our relationship, and it's your anxiety. Oh my God. Yeah. Because it's a factor. It's intense, and it's something that, I manage it. So I think that it is something that we need to take care of, just like we would any other.
So your first book was called Hiding in the Bathroom When I'm Supposed to Be Somewhere Else. Talk about that title.
How to get out there when I'd rather stay home.
How to get out there when I'd rather stay home. Okay. I gave you the quick version. Talk about that title and how it's led to writing about the root of that anxiety.
Yeah, I'm a huge introvert. I don't know if anyone else in the audience identifies as an introvert. And I also have social anxiety. And what I've learned in my research that's very interesting and maybe instructive is, we really conflate introversion and social anxiety in our culture. And we view introversion kind of negatively because we think that, introverts are people who, hide, don't want to talk to people, aren't funny, aren't sparkly. And that's not true. A lot of what we think might be introversion is actually social anxiety, which is a learned behavior that is really, really common, right? And social anxiety is really the sense that is, again, so human. I have a middle schooler, so I really relate, of walking into a room and feeling judged, right? Or feeling like you don't belong, or you're not smart enough, or people aren't going to like you.
The imposter syndrome.
Imposter feelings for sure.
Explain what that is and how that leads to this kind of sense of severe anxiety.
I mean, imposter feelings are really about anxiety. It's really about the sense of, like I just said, I don't belong. These people are better than me, When you look at a lot of the research, and of course Brené Brown has changed the world for this, we humans hold shame deeply, and it's something that a lot of us are constantly trying to protect against. I interviewed a wonderful psychologist from BU, Ellen Hendrickson, and she said a lot of us have social anxiety because we fear being revealed for who we truly are, and we don't want people to see that, and we're nervous about it. And that, I found that really moving.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Really moving.
Yeah.
That's sad, but
we want to reveal who we really are?
not always.
Not always.
And also, in society, we're not always allowed to reveal who we are if we're different, especially at work. This stuff is really complicated, which is why we have to talk about it.
So you describe yourself as an anxious achiever, yet your resume is off the charts. Successful. How are you so high achieving and anxious at the same time?
Because my anxiety makes me high achieving.
Explain.
I had a friend, and she said, well, if I wasn't anxious, I wouldn't be good at my job. And that's the tricky thing, right? A lot of us anxious achievers grow up, and we are raised to sort of hit external milestones, right? And we get praise when we do. Or we grow up in households that feel insecure, and we learn that when we take care of people, or we perform, or we achieve in some way, we feel loved. I can't tell you how many podcast episodes I have with people saying, I'm so successful because I learned when I was growing up that I was loved if I got A's or I was captain of the baseball team. And I carried that through, and that's the tricky thing. A lot of us, we anxiously achieve, and it serves us until it doesn't. And this is where I see a lot of leaders, because a lot of anxiety shows up at work in terms of a lot of conscientiousness, micromanaging, doing it yourself, working really hard, staying late, right? Always showing up, pushing past. And that can get you pretty far, but it can't get you all the way, because that's not really leadership, right? That's just control. And to be leaders, we have to let other people be awesome. And so, a lot of times, and I've experienced this myself, it's sort of unpacking that story of, yes, I'm gonna work so hard and I'm gonna be awesome, but I don't always have to be the best. I don't always have to be right. right, I can be wrong so other people can be right.
That was learned.
It's learned, I think, for most of us.
And how did you do
Therapy.
that? She's giving out names. But yeah, I mean, that's a painful, I mean, it's a tough process. It's a process. But yeah, right. It doesn't just click.
But if I had a nickel for every person who messaged me on LinkedIn and said my boss is toxic, I can't work here anymore, I'd be very rich. And a lot of that is from learned behaviors and anxiety that shows up at work.
So what's the difference between anxiety and fear?
I'm not a scientist, but I will say, I think this is actually, and stress too. This is really, to me, this was a real aha moment. You know, anxiety is an emotion, it's an internal state. It's a threat response. Fear and stress are threat responses as well, but they're external. And so fear is when you're driving on the highway and a truck pulls in front of you and you brake and you feel, right? It's terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Stress is when your boss comes in and says, I need this by 5 o'clock. The boss has put a stressor on you. The anxiety is what you feel in response to that stress. Or what you feel maybe, I can't get back in the car again. I'm terrified to get back in the car because this is gonna happen to me again, so maybe I'm not gonna drive. Or, I can't get this done by 5, they're gonna judge me. Or I got it done, but I'm not gonna be able to get it done, so what does that say about me? So anxiety is an internal response to those externals, but they show up similarly.
So controlling that anxiety that appears to be a bit of a piece of the human condition, there's your challenge, right?
You can't control it.
You can't yet, and talk about that
Right.
versus managing.
Right. I mean, this is, I don't know if there's any therapists in the room. Back me up here. You can't control it. Life is hard, right? We get activated, we get triggered, we get cued. And the magic is in how we respond to the anxiety. And I feel like that's the life's work of almost everyone I've interviewed. It's my own life's work. The only advice I have, and this one piece of advice really changed my life, is to learn when you are anxious and to sort of take a beat before you react. Because so many of us, right? It's like we walk into a dark room, the lights go on. When we're anxious, we feel like an imposter, or we reach for a glass of wine, right? We have habits. And it's that act of taking a beat that can really change you.
Do anxious people tend to be attracted to each other, or is it the opposite?
I don't know. What do you think? That's interesting. I know that anxiety is contagious on teens, and probably in families too. You see in companies and teams, for example, when layoffs are happening, right? And so, or the leader of the team has received a mandate that is making them anxious, that it sort of trickles down and around.
So it sounds like this is a part of our species, right, the human condition. So managing it, medication versus meditation versus whatever. How do we navigate this thing that is so common to all of us?
I mean, we don't navigate it alone, right? I mean, as a mom, I would never, if my kid had a diagnosis, say, well, I'm just gonna figure this out for them, and not help them. And especially as women, we don't help ourselves all the time. And we just push through, and we're busy taking care of everyone else. But we have to. And, for me, having bipolar disorder, like I do everything. I do everything. And it's become infrastructure. I'm actually working on an article about what we all can learn from elite athletes. Athletes don't show up alone. They have a team, and they eat well, and they have nutrition, and they have psychologists, and they have mindset coaches. And I think for us as well, as women in our lives, if we have the privilege to go to a job and earn money and live in this world, we need to think of ourselves like that. And we need to have infrastructure and support ourselves.
So that means we should reach out to other in our sphere. But that's scary for anxious people, right?
I think it depends on how you're raised. things that I'm really interested in this country is mental health literacy. You know, some of us, myself included, I grew up in a household where everybody went to therapy. There was no shame. My parents' friends were all therapists. It was just like, whoa. And then I work with people, you know, I just was interviewing someone and she said, you know, it wasn't until I was 30 that I even knew what the word anxiety meant. I couldn't figure out why I was breaking out in cold sweats at work every day, and someone said, you're anxious. And I went on that journey. So a lot of it is how you're raised and the culture you come from. There's a lot of cultural differences too.
So over the years that you've been studying this and experiencing it, what are some lessons, both hard and soft, that you've kind of taken away that you could share with us tonight?
The first is that anxiety is normal, and that as we grow in our careers, we get anxious. It's part of it, right? And the great parts about anxiety, besides that motivating energy, is that when we learn to manage it, we really are creative. We look forward. We're good in a crisis. We can build empathy, right? Because if I've been through tough stuff, I can feel your tough stuff.
This almost sounds liberating.
It is liberating.
Is it?
It's extremely liberating.
It sounds terrifying too, though.
But it's who you are. You can't change it. You know. I mean, I think that any of us who have someone in our lives who's wired differently or is neurodivergent or has a tricky brain, we're not going to say change yourself.
Yeah.
Cure yourself, right?
Right.
Understand yourself and channel the gifts and get support for what's not great. So that's my first piece. And then, you know, I think one of the things that was life-changing for me, and my friend Rebecca Harley at NGH taught me this, is that we can play detectives with our emotion and our anxiety. And a way you could start is tomorrow morning at work, you could just pay attention to how your body feels throughout the day. Like maybe tonight when you go home, you've had a good time, you've had some drinks, like you're relaxed. And then how are you feeling by 9:30 in your workday? Do you have a tight stomach? Is your body tight? You know? Is there a meeting that makes you feel anxious? Is there a person's name in your email inbox? This is such a really like interesting way.
Triggers.
Totally. What's going on here? Start tuning in.
So in other words, take note, right? Take inventory.
Be mindful. Yeah.
Meditation? What do you think?
I think meditation is great. It's very difficult when you're anxious.
Medication.
Love it.
Drinks? No, just kidding. But medication. You're not, this is also a stigma, right?
I think medication is a stigma, you know, I think it's a stigma, but
But this is also not,
Okay, not in Silicon
it's
Valley.
not 1923.
it's not. And it's funny, not in Silicon Valley, there's a really interesting movement happening. I don't know if any of you are in the VC world or startup world for founder mental health. And there's actually research that shows that
What's
people,
founder mental?
like if you found a company,
Oh, okay, yeah.
there's research that shows that people who are entrepreneurs are higher dopamine seeking, and they tend towards having more mental illnesses and what we used to call disabilities like ADHD. There's a real movement, and there's a movement to talk about it. There's a movement to take drugs about it and talk about it. You've read about Elon Musk taking ketamine, but that's a piece of it. And I'm sort of adjacent to this, and I think it's really interesting because it really is a community of people who are saying, this is how I'm wired, and it makes me who I am.
So I'm gonna throw it open to the audience. There's a lot to, not unpack, but just to, absorb from your wonderful insights. Does anybody have a first question they wanna throw out to get the conversation in the room going? Yeah.
I'd be curious what you think about, I'm making up a term here, but like adjacent anxiety. If someone in your family is really anxious, but absorbing that, and how you respond.
So the idea is adjacent anxiety.
I mean, anxiety is contagious, right? And so you might be with that person who's anxious and you may feel anxious because they're anxious. You may feel like you need to solve them. I was doing a lunchtime talk today and someone said, it's hard. They worked in social justice and they said, I'm such an empathetic person, I want to change the world. And so a colleague comes to me and they need help, I want to fix them. But I can't. And so the talk of boundaries is true. If you're with someone and you're absorbing for them, you might need to sort of look at your own boundaries so you can protect yourself.
Yet women, as we're the providers, we're the nurturers, we're the bearers of the children. We're socialized to create, to fix, and so that's an extra pressure on us.
Yeah, and when we see someone we care about in pain, we want to make it better. And anxious people can be overfunctioners, and that means that you are always the one who's going to fix it. And so you may even take on someone's anxiety and express it for them. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship at work where you feel like you do everything and the other person does nothing. Or in your marriage.
Now you're not.
But I have a chapter in the book that talks about overfunctioning and underfunctioning, because you may be, through your own anxiety, taking on the work for them so they don't have to.
I mean, aren't there fixers and non-fixers, right? I mean, a lot of us are drawn to people because we can try to fix them, right? And that's a burden and a curse, right?
And usually doesn't work.
No. Oh, yes.
So just to expand on that, I have a family member, my older sister, and I say that so you know I can't do this. She is an anxious achiever. She's a perfectionist. She has gotten very high in her career in everything that she's ever done, and she's been trying over the years to step back. But I don't think that she totally sees it as, I think your description of an anxious achiever is like, it was new to me, and I think it's something that fits her really well, but she doesn't really see it as that. And so I'm wondering, like, how do you support someone, not changing them obviously, but how do you help someone make the path so that they see it or that they understand themselves and you're not like, this is what's wrong with you. You're going to be you.
Well, obviously by the book, right? It's so funny because I am an older sister, and I'm like, my little sister cannot tell me what to do. I mean, you really could send her my podcast. I think that media is such a powerful way that we tell stories and that we help people have insights. The thing about it is it's going to work for her, and it may work for her for a really long time, but at some point it probably is not going to work for her anymore. And I would hate to see her get to that point. So many people I work with have just reached burnout. They get depressed, they sort of leave everything impulsively. And so, maybe dropping hints or showing her media, or just because you can really push yourself too far.
Let's keep it going here. Yeah? Yeah, sure.
So, sort of an adjacent question. So, there were quite a few of us having conversations earlier tonight, and we have, kids or young adults of a certain age, and, a lot of them have been through COVID, and, I think there is almost sort of an epidemic of anxiety in certain generations, which is, very understandable, I think, in terms of what they've had to deal with. So I guess my question would be, with, a young person, a child, what are the best ways maybe to have them look at it as more of a positive? A lot of these young people, I think, are also really self-aware, so it's not like you have to tell them that they're anxious or that they're dealing with a lot of mental health issues. A lot of them are all too aware. But, how do you kind of help them maybe reframe it in these more positive ways?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's something that I think when I go speak on campuses, I think administrators and educators are really wrestling with. Let's look, if someone's in crisis, they're in crisis, and they need help, and that's it. A lot of people, younger people, are very, very anxious, and actually younger people are more anxious when you look at life cycle data. You get less anxious as you get older, because you get older. And one of the things that I try to help people think about that I find very useful is when you're feeling very anxious and overwhelmed, is to try to hook into your values and what you stand for. And adults can do this. You know, when we feel anxious and overwhelmed, when we just take a minute and try to hook into our values and say, you know, I used to have this because I had anxiety about flying and I had to fly. And I would be on the runway and I would say, you know, you have 3 children to support. You love your business, you've built this, you're proud of this, you're here for a reason. The anxiety would lessen. And I think for young people, teaching them to understand what they value and giving them the sense of agency is powerful. I was giving a talk at Brown, my alma mater, and I got this question, and I said, well, you know, did anyone force you to apply to an Ivy League college? Are you here by choice? It's stressful. I was talking to McKinsey employees. You chose to work at McKinsey. It's stressful. But if this is rooted in who you are and your sense of self, it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be stressed out. It's okay to be anxious. In moderation.
But that's the challenge of channel, right?
Yeah, and that takes
That takes
distance and wisdom, but I think,
Yeah.
you know, helping young people understand the element of what they stand for is powerful.
This is great.
When you say that, to look in, I think that
Can you speak
involves
up?
a bit of pause, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you talk about pause with, say, a younger group versus an older group? Because it's easy to react to whatever is spinning in your head, but it's the pause that you need before you can get out of control. So what's your advice on pause, or how do you?
So the question is the power of the pause and how you,
I love that question.
yeah, that's a great,
How do you
really-
pause?
That's a really great question.
I mean, literally, you pause, right? I mean, we can do it right now. Put your feet on the floor. And, and put your hand on your sternum. Or some people like to put their top of their pulse. Maybe you can close your eyes. And just pause. Feel your hand on your sternum. And if you want extra credit, you could think about something that you did today that you feel good about. And it could be something small. It could be that you got a walk in on this beautiful day, or you made some good food, or you called your mom, or you got that memo written. And just see it and feel it and say, I did a good job with that.
Concentrate on the good.
So you just pause. Anything, just to sort of center you.
So when you talk about concentrate on the good, I think that it used to be easier to be good enough. I think there's so much pressure to be extraordinary because you see extraordinary demonstrated everywhere, and then you go home and go, but I'm so regular. Most everybody feels they're so regular, and I think there's so much pressure, and I think our young people are feeling that with social media, where they only see highlights. And I think when you speak to the fact that that's creating more anxiety, this pressure to be better and better and better. Instead of just a good enough life, good enough. Well lived, well loved.
How many of you saw Barbie? Did you like Barbie? I love Barbie. Josephine and I love Barbie, right? But at the end, she said, America Ferrera is sort of like, you don't have to be President Barbie or Nobel Prize winning Barbie. You could just be happy Barbie, woman Barbie, mom, you having a good enough day Barbie. I think that's really true, yeah.
I read something somewhere not long ago that said, if the world was really TikTok, my life sucks. It is so true. TikTok, it appears, or Instagram, it all appears the high points, right? And then you begin to think, my life so sucks. I'm so boring. I'm so mediocre. And that's a pressure. Imagine being 13 and seeing that. Only the highlights, right? Which we know is not real. But therein lies the curse of social media, right? That's gotta be a big, big issue with younger kids, with anxiety issues.
I think it's
right, the pressures.
Totally, but I think it's a pressure for all of us, you know, I mean, I don't think that older people we're not immune.
No.
You know, I can't tell you how many times I'll be having a good day and I'll check my LinkedIn and so-and-so is just giving a huge TED talk and so-and-so has won a prize and, right? And there was-
Overachiever, Morra Aarons Mele.
and there goes my ego, but also that's the point of social media. That's literally the point. And so I think, again, coming back to, you know, this is a product and the point is to do this to me. What do I stand for in the world?
Yeah.
Which is hard.
I wanted to share one thing. I'm a Wellesley College graduate, and one of the speakers, I used to run forums for the college across the country. And we had a top-notch CEO get up, and we were all in awe of her. And she drew a graph, and she said, my career has been like this. And it went up and up and up, boom, and she was the best of everything. She said, my personal life has been like this, and she drew a jagged line across the bottom. And she had a terrible marriage, her children were all messed up because she had traveled, and she was honest enough to reveal that. Instead of us all being so daunted by what she had done, she made choices. And my mother used to say, Lisa, don't judge someone by a snapshot in their life. You must look at the entire thing. Don't be envious. Do you want it all? Do you want all the messy stuff behind that one little snapshot? And I think what we see too much of is everyone's snapshot instead of all the messy stuff, and you think, God, they've got a great life. And it's no. Maybe your regular life that's not too messy and it's a steady on is good. It's great.
Just, there we go.
Could you please speak to the relationship between anxiety and confidence and how in the workplace, the more you work up the ladder, the more confidence you get? Can that offset anxiety? Or if you self-define as being anxious at an early age, does that stop you from feeling confident later on?
That's a great question, and I don't know the research-based answer to that, but that's a really good question. My anecdotal advice and answer is no. I think that you can be anxious and confident. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that you don't stop being anxious once you have achieved what you want to be, right? So I think the two often really, in my experience, working with leaders, really coexist. The other thing is we have things, like I can get up in front of a room and talk to tons of people and it does not faze me. But if I go have lunch with like a mom friend in Lexington, I'm a wreck. So,
Why?
because I feel like I'm wasting her time and she doesn't like me and I'm not good enough.
Right?
It makes no sense. So the thing is that we're all different, and so what makes us anxious in one area, we may be totally unfazed by in another.
Thank you.
You know, when you're talking, and I'm gonna say, I don't have like a lot of anxiety, but my daughter does, and so it's funny, because I don't understand her anxiety, but I try to help her with it, but, you know, when you're talking, it makes me think of like, in today's day and age, we're always comparing ourselves to somebody else, you know, like, and you know, I grew up like in a blue collar town, and then I did really well in business, and so I lived in this white collar, lovely group of women, and I love you all, but I don't come from this, and so, you know, I don't feel like the imposter syndrome, I just feel like I am who I am, and take it or leave it, but I can see like when we compare to others and you're talking about like going to lunch, like sometimes like, what do I talk about? You know, and there is this thing in society and with social media that I feel like can create the anxiety, right? Because I don't know if we had it as much before as now. What do you think about how social media or just everyone pretending to be something or whatever, how do you see that as affecting things?
I have a controversial answer, which is I don't agree with you.
Okay.
I mean, keeping up with the Joneses is one of the oldest sayings, you know, I mean, I think it's human nature to compare. It's a thought trap of anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah, right, comparison is a thought trap, so that is an anxious thought.
Yeah.
But I think it's extremely human
Yeah.
too. I am in awe of you that you feel this, and that must be a really good way to live. Because you're free from the comparison trap, but I also know that it is one of the most common ways that our brain reacts to anxiety, and you know, it can get in your way, and so it's something you can work on so we can get to be like you know. But again, I think when we feel the pressure of comparison, having that value system to sort of hook back into is really powerful, right? And yours might be, I grew up in this world and, you know, it made me who I am and I like that. And I don't feel the need, you know, whatever it is for anyone.
How about a couple more and then we'll wrap it up? Sure.
So, sorry, I haven't read your book yet,
That's
but I
okay.
do need to. So I know you're talking a little bit about medicine and how you don't think it's a stigma, and I don't think it is either. But did you learn in your research about sort of, it sometimes is a chemical thing too, which is where medicine can come in, and why it shouldn't be a stigma? Did you learn anything about chemicals and how that affects, you know, body chemicals and how that affects anxiety?
Yes, I mean, you know, anxiety is a chemical and hormonal response, so it's totally dependent. You know, I mean, I think you could talk to 1 million doctors and people would give you 1 million different reasons why we're anxious, but we've always been anxious and we always will be. The question is, why does it go haywire, right? Or why are some of us just born that way? You know, I think that I do try to talk about medicine on LinkedIn. I know so many people who have been affected by the current stimulus shortage. You know, you really can't get Adderall and Ritalin and a lot of the medicines that people rely on for ADHD, for narcolepsy, for a lot of disorders. And that's a problem for business. That's a problem for work. And so, you know, I think that the less stigma we have, the better, because pharmaceutical companies need to know that lots of people, you know, I interviewed a woman who has narcolepsy and she can't get her Adderall and she really can't work. If I went off my meds, it would be bad. So I think that, again, if we look at this stuff as being biochemical, whatever, in nature, maybe it does reduce the stigma. Like, I need my diabetes medicine.
Do you have one more? Yeah, Trish.
About leadership and the disclosure of a leader, like you said, CEOs are nervous to reveal that they have anxiety because they're worried about the stock price. Are we evolving though to the point, you think in the near future, where it's so commonly discussed, mental health is not, it's way more open, the topic is freely discussed, that leaders will be able to be more transparent to their teams and say, I'm going through an anxious period, or do you think that will happen? Do you think that there will be more transparency?
It is happening. I really do believe it. Not everyone wants to come on a national podcast. I get that.
Yeah.
But I think that certainly in peer groups, it's becoming much more popular. And, you know, I think that so much is normalized that wasn't even normalized 10 years ago. And the pandemic really gave it a kick in the pants.
Yeah.
Really gave it a kick in the pants. So I do feel hopeful about that. I don't know what you think.
Well, thank you so much, Norm.